Hello, humanity. From the time we are young, we have people who make confessions to us that they blame on other things, others, or selves. Nature's demonstrations. That and how all formal identities of the law and the exceptions, like everyone else. Everyone has been blaming other things, others, or selves for the real worst causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. And things like slavery. It was caused by a human factory nature breaching method. And if we observe, as we are capable of doing, what they were doing with those laws, with that crazy breaching method, and the difference between those laws, overt criminal enterprises and private ones, that was also used by the breaching method to keep itself left out. This effectively, since before modern nations A through Z, did the same thing to all groupings of humanity. And it knew that they would have to be syntax, speaking for humanity, incapable of doing it properly. And nature would demonstrate that, where they couldn't afford, demonstrations of that. So there's a quality of fact-cheating nature that is criminal insidiousness, that has been self-valued. See how in the link I put at the end of it, Professor Warren refuses to go to the Congress when Israeli leader is going to show up there. And this is for Palestine. This is for A through Z. See, our names, we have not had possession of our names. That's one of the things that we are prevented short words to demonstrate. Judge Napolitano's sources, including other judges, have roles with switching names because they have roles with styles and as natures, as collusions with the identity theft, fraud, slander method that is manifest against each sickly, non-distinctly impositioned upon by this human factory nature breaching method, a scientific value relative also to the nature of debate, containment, where and how. The nature of debate, they have styles that can't defend, styles forced by nature that can't defend themselves in their premises treatments and afford to have what's actually discerned, like people having tried to use sequence shifts as evidences on a mass scale, all sides in criminal and civil cases, and the interbranch, and their lawyers, both sides, and the lawyers of the court, and everyone's family members, and the news at the same time. They're still planting life progressions, cover-ups from having done that, sequence shifts, where and how, in other words, American history and its principles by nature are shown to be tactical ulterior from that which was told to us. To understand this, we have to understand how our founders communicated. I read they told us. They agreed with George. They wanted to be represented by the face of James Madison. In other words, to keep it clear. And they were using his plan. And then they went and got George Washington to agree to help them with their plan. And that plan involved them then going and counter-extorting, forcing people. And at 13 locations to become the first 13 states. But they had to force them because already still entrenched, no one could do anything about it, even that. Was roles with that method against everyone. An identity theft, fraud, slander method. Manifest sickly, non-distinct. See, everyone was sickly, distinctly hurt because this breaching method knew nature would demonstrate that while demonstrating nature too, the breaching method. Worse than a COVID virus. I'm not a doctor. Also, doctors have recorded, see, we have to use the hyper evidential. See, Doctors use the evidential, but still evidence racketeering worse than war crimes rules. Indifference racketeering worse than war crime rules. And we have black pupils, whites of eyes, same color eyes at the same time and different color eyes to discern this. There is one identity of volume that is unlike all others. And its identity of relationship to itself and the value of that are equally only increasing with any subject we could grapple with, individually, grouped, or together, or experience and or diffuse. And know how there are multiple definitions of diffusion at the same time. This is not like diffuse a bomb. This is everything at once. In other words, its identity relationship to itself and the value of that, the hyperrelativity. Hyperrelativity is real. And for example, there are 5 distinct identities of order. As itself, what really was true first? Nature shows us there was a breaching method sustained against Native Americans before America's founders were born. Also, the design of the suburbs had been already come up with. As collusions, self-value, but that was only first. So you start self-valuing all kinds of things, not realizing when you self-value when you self-value the real worst causes of the real worst negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures blamed on things others or self, even when correctly, exactly the way the breaching method wants and needs. So, one thing we could do without blaming anyone, realize that the suburbs were designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and nature. And the cities were only allowed to unfold like that. Experts on the Civil War are self-valued roles, for example. Keeping the causes of it blamed on other things, others, ourselves, and keeping rules with it blamed on other things, others, ourselves. Slavery was still entrenched in North America and northern colonies, in northern states and southern states, just as it had been sickly, distinctly northern colonies and southern colonies, because there was the breaching method used functionally, how sickly non-distinctly was simultaneous. And that was being demonstrated to everyone by the hyper-simultaneous. But the laws and what everyone was collusions with and in fear from properly, if they would bring that into the reason, they would be sensed and hurt, even if they were a majority of people, even if they were everyone black pupils. We are in a semi-ancient trap that knew suits and ties, counters, even if they know suits and ties exactly. And exceptions would be that. Collusions, those differences used to pretend, but keep things blamed on other things, others themselves. Connecticut has a corrections office and the location of it, right between Hartford and Connecticut. And the location of the state judicial branches, right? In other words, since founding these locations, since their inception, they have been collusion/S with the breaching method and its uses of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and the interbranch has criminal insidiousness natures, and the differences between that. All sides in criminal and civil cases, all communications, locations, names, ones tied to them. Names next to all natures of crime scenes. So this breaching method measures and maintains crime scenes, the only thing that are allowed to be possible, or collusion/S with the foreign and domestic, with the Even with the prisons, how come we never left out how the prisons have roles recorded? See, what's actually recorded can be the hyper evidential can be shown. They're putting fake evidence and tactically delusions raw evidences. See, people took oaths at each age. There are proofs that kids took oaths. In other words, relative to the use of confessions by the breaching method. The breaching method used confessions and it affected them through entertained other natures of organized crime, and legitimate things, and the difference of them, because it needs that too. To be used when people are styles of logic, reason, uses of others' names, uses of premises treatment, uses of the value of titles, and relative to the discernment of intellectual worth. Black pupils, New York City, here. In other words, you have people who are involved preventing mandated law, with all exceptions, the exception nature and demonstration of the same thing /s. Forgiveness is because this breaching method only allowed anyone who, like, for example, in one of Judge Napolitano's Judging Freedom YouTube channel videos, he noted how he had an unbelievable amount of people. He didn't say, he said a number, I couldn't even repeat it because you wouldn't believe me, of how many people he had who came before him for an arraignment. So apparently he was in one day when he first became a judge. So I assume that means he was a superior court judge. Superior courts deal with like arrests for things that, like, common things that would happen. I'm not a lawyer. This is a part of their confessions, and this is a part of the things they're supposed to keep secret, even though, like, even informally. But in other words, they have all kinds of natures of organized crime and predicate acts with facts methods. And collusion /s, not the way that we know, with all natures of, like, if they're going to have the elements of all these crimes associated with the under unmarked police forms, foreign and domestic. See, but these are roles with use of location, everywhere the species body is, /s, A through Z, for a method that effectively propagated, self-cultivated styles of logic with the uses of names and of names of locations A through Z and names of people A through Z through and out of systems tactical ulterior from nature while pretending other, and where and how nature's as positive communicates about the difference between positive, but nature also communicates with this about the difference between positive, that is, the criminal insidiousness nature of positive, for nature's means of communicating about the law, and with a special difference. Earth has a special difference that science shows to us. Only the extent of this is debatable. For example, just like only the extent of it is debatable, it's not even legitimately debatable if someone says convicts. The breaching method that had been entrenched before America's founders were born, it had assigned the colors black and white to communicate tactical ulterior from how and from why. Nature shows us that we have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time. It shows us these colors are distinct, non-distinct, simultaneous, /hyper simultaneous. It even shows us this with the value of the slash. And where and how the sciences English was revealed with other ancient languages, appreciating, while before the sciences became criminally foreign influenced, where and how the sciences share an identity, and where and how there are exceptions, that there are the appearance of exceptions that show other. They come with demonstrations of the same thing, /s, which is simultaneously, hyper additionally, about how it's showing, about it goes with how it's showing us more and more hyper additional nature as itself is being made as nature's identity, its identity of relationship to itself, and as the only increasing value of that. So, for example, Judge Napolitano has referred to Jeffrey Sachs as an expert on St. Thomas Aquinas. Meanwhile, no, both the Old Testament and the Quran both have parts in the beginning that tell the reader, that qualify the reader, and in other words, that tells the reader how to interpret those books. But no one even knows about that parts because they're how to defend those books properly. But no one knows that because they were defended wrong. And as collusion with the people that attacked them, per the uses of difference /X black pupils by this breaching method that was capable of keeping everyone non-distinctly enslaved, not wanting to be. In other words, even the slaveholders in the same house, designed suburbs, designed to, they would have made them a little bit wider. Would make a huge difference. In other words, there's a difference between taxing people because we need things, and taxing people the way that taxes state. Black pupils. Per that breaching method, that slavery method, that still forces, tricks, hurt, and persuades adults to experts on American history to force, trick, hurt, and persuade people to blame on other things, others ourselves. Will cause things like slavery and pretend they're experts. They're going to use the knowledge of good and evil. No, use a phrase from Old Testament to get over on correlation nature. The value of people who want to use sequence shifts as truths. That's hyper evidential. That's not a document. See, they're locking names on all sides of criminal and civil cases. The news at the same time. Their lawyers, their family members, the people that work for the lawyers, the judges, the prosecutors, their family members, the people that work for them. Every time there's evidences where he said, she said, it had to do with the corners of the streets or in your memories, there's a hyper criminally foreign influence there. This is where the nature shows us that we need to name a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise and we need to make an anti-hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise act that is using also the styles of logic and the natures of logic as they are actually recorded. We have to be led by the hyper-invisible but still discernible. See, the criminal insidiousness natures pretend that someone's calm or if they yell. Means positive or negative dishonestly, tactically delusions raw, and criminally foreign influence /hyper criminally foreign influence. They are also putting mass fake physical and verbal behavior into databases where and how all investigators in their campuses have been staged collusion /S with even way worse at all locations /S that doesn't seem such. And on both are manifest because there's an identity of relativity as not just as nature, but also as a breaching method, as a scientific value with reason. How logic works properly to discern. So there are these five identities of time that are simultaneously positive. Otherwise, it's a criminal insidious since nature positive. There is the value of truth before the order of the finite, which is the first. There is the order of the finite, the smallest finite detail, the smallest finite thing, or the value of what came first. And the relativity to it, how it has us asking questions, no. See, we have been systems A through Z, individually grouped and together, self-valued, having been tacticalitarian. Even two Native Americans arguing with each other. In other words, that's not a good example. But the Native Americans are 1/3 of our founders. James Madison and the founders behind him are another founder, and the second third of our founders. And then how they had the counter extorted at 13 locations. The other founders we know. We have the other part left out, and we're supposed to fill in the rest. And forgiveness is important for this because the prisons, the courts, the police stations, Wethersfield police have wire crime acts and methods involved with them forging and switching names. There's a red tinted, it's not red hair, but it's like red tinted hair, a kid. He was associated with people with the parks and recreation and mayors and intelligence community, foreign and domestic, and overt criminal enterprises involved with parks where they take pictures of people next to each other and pretend they know each other and that the people are lying. See, when Judge Napolitano is a very intelligent guest, but their premises treatments are broken grammar school, broken as the peak campuses, New York City. Like, in other words, when did one campus speak for science properly? New York City, the breaching method did more to design the infrastructure of New York City than New York City did it for itself. It uses everyone remotely. Your styles of logic, reason, syntax, natures. So you're preventing counters. A whole bunch of people at Hartford Hospital involved with a Wethersfield Community Center, and with names on different campuses in with town offices, state corrections offices, state judicial branch offices. Wethersfield Pizza has Steven Stacco, and I don't know if it's a Maria Stacco or Maria Vizina, and involved with a Mark Violet and his neighbors, Brian Bonin. Sought me out 2 times, the only time I ever saw him in his life, and one time on non-verbally involved with the Zano family and people with the name McCord, involved with all sides in criminal and civil cases used to plant evidences with Police Chief Cintron, all along Route 3. There are people also with the name Casper that have been identity theft, fraud, slanders, also with people all along Route 175 and its conjunctions, like Walker Hill Road and Ridge Road, are people involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. There was a little girl, Arita. They didn't explain why they were. In other words, she was pretty. I liked her, but I didn't explain to her. They recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. She's involved with mayors' families and people associated with conversations with mayors and other politicians. And I found out it's medical families too. And for a whole bunch of different countries with our side's roles. here and there, and their side's roles over there. Fake. They're different. They want to be different as systems tactiliterian from how nature employed A through Z. Differences as its body. The tip of your nail can't be your complete identity, but it is anyway. Because the hyper-simultaneous completes everything. So there are people dying in Palestine, and the Israeli leaders coming over and there's these interests and but the lobbyists, stuff like that. That's all evidence is that. Don't leave it superficial like that. And what those evidences show, though, too, are locations, areas, and states keeping other things, others, ourselves blamed for where and how that breaching method needs and uses black and white and the difference. So they have their differences, cultural, sexual, interbranch, used dishonestly because they were taught to speak for the law. How they speak for the law? They haven't even cleaned up the black people's rights of eyes. They haven't even brought this to the subject yet. So there are these two of the five individually grouped in together. What came first before the smallest finite detail is distinct from the smallest finite detail in the order of the finite, with and through it. Because the finite, that which is active grouped, and that which is simultaneous, comes also with these two. It's actually three, where it's, in other words, the beginning of the discernment of it comes with these two other identities of order. For example, what really was true but first? Not denying the smallest finite detail, not valuing the smallest finite detail left out by whoever, even if it's not someone not present, increasingly which is roles. For example, Hartford Hospital has an Institute of Living on its campus involved with hospitals throughout the country where they have mental health experts and they have mental diagnosis where they've been fabricating conversations. Then they pretend, oh, well, it's all you have to do is something real quick and that's all it takes to be dead mentally diagnosed. They're putting whole fake conversations with people categorically as doctors, personally and professionally involved with judges and prosecutors and on-off state judicial branches, offices. So these are things that are simple to discern, and they are hard to discern and deal with. Tactical terror from what they pretend is hard and easy, because they are using systems, tactical terror from nature. Nature is what is hot, while it is what is cold, while it is the value of what is warm. In other words, so on-off the state judicial branch offices, I never had the pleasure of having a conversation with Mr. Potter, who was my teacher in 8th grade. That has something to do with a Chet Casper, and I don't know his sister's name, and his educators with the intelligence community, including ones and students in the difference of that is exploited with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, all these different countries, remote uses of them, and their roles in Washington, D.C., and World Trade Center attack names. Neighbors of a Dan King and his mother and father, and I guess he has brothers, I don't know, and his other neighbors, like other neighbors too, not just this one. There's one with the name Fienza, who increasingly people tied to them have roles with body dumping spots and confessions to me and then pretended they know me. I didn't even respond to them. In other words, that's one of the things they use were location/s. These are also people on off Fox Connecticut News, on off WFSB, as the ones on off New Britain Superior Court's Facebook page, has roles with rape threats. And these are people with passion crimes as confirmations. Before the World Trade Center attack, Hartford courts and the Britain's courts people, including a Connecticut district court, has prosecutors, judges, and their family members with foreign and domestic military. They were planting evidences at West Hartford locations, and they involved on-off religious spots. The mother and father have narratives regarding their roles with a religious place that's near the West Farms Mall, associated with people with the name Scalora, too. A whole bunch of people tied to the name Scalora and DeMorrow have roles with West Farms Mall and that park there. And there's a fire department near that. There's a Eric Burgess is one of the ones who recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, and the courts did. But while they're pretending other, they have roles, have been planted evidences with the former director of the FBI too, involved with people that work associated with Hartford courts and the Britain courts, involved with Eric Burgess, also with leaders of kids, involved with sexual and medical offenses of them, and the counters as men and women faking and changing evidences with the same things, and the people that run the prisons and their campuses, like Central Connecticut State University, has roles training people to be corrections, training people to be state police. They have roles with foreign and domestic military families. Like there's one that's the ones that sought me out to make confessions. Well, either way, different times in life. In other words, then they want to hide that, as the ones involved with the principal child offenders, proven and more recorded, and their family members further being abused to keep them self-value roles. In other words, people from Central Connecticut State University who work for different real estate companies than my mother used to work for. In other words, they had conversations with people named DeMorrow, who FBI director, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, in various courts, have been planting evidences on off campuses, attaching little kids and their families to fake communications with themselves and others, and with doctors, and with the news at the same time, on off body dumping spots and murder spots that have connections, even if any of them were made up, and shootings, confessions, which was, even if that was made up. The people that live in the houses next to apartments, and the difference between the apartments leaders or the houses next to them, they have collusions with that, with prosecutors and judges who have been planting evidences with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and people that are involved with Canada and Mexico and all these other, and Saudi Arabia. They forced Saudi Arabia to collusions, as Saudis also forced them to collusions with the hyperforeign, with the World Trade Center attack. As people with the name Scalora and DeMorrow, who recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, also roles with the neighbors of the Keenhop family, and having sexual circle where they're all jealous or something like that. And they're just, even any or all of it was made up because they were being, these are people that have been putting predicate acts with facts in databases at every campus and between them, and use roles with uses of the lie progression. So increasingly, people next to where I went to 1 year, a kindergarten class, have roles with predicate acts with facts with the names, as the names that live next to that school, with the people also that were putting the families that were teaching, a Harris family. I found out there's also a Leahy family involved with it. They've been using corners of buildings and of streets for evidences crimes with judges and prosecutors, as people time collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and roles with hyper evidentially recorded remote uses of Judge Napolitano's Facebook page, and of his sense and sensibility, and as their roles with all natures of investigators, in all campuses, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, rot black pupils. They have the audacity. You know, in other words, online when people speak about predicate acts to pretend they don't understand people, just in other words, they're just confessing more. Wethersfield police attached me to fake communications and changed communications with them at their location as a kid, now as an adult. They have wire crime acts and methods where they now they had to just fake more and more fake emails by me. Change what's actually recorded emails by me. They have to fake phone conversations with me. Change actual phone conversations with me while they're making them up. Also with the sources who call things into police because they have to hide life progressions, and they have awareness of how there are federal investigators against such. But all campuses are criminally foreign influenced. Inter-services, whole bunch of people with Hartford Hospital, though, but all these hospitals. But UConn has roles with a Violet family. They say it has something to do with the roles all along Route 3 through time. Since I was a kid, every year more and more people with Route 3 are involved with federal evidences crimes with communications locations. These are also people with Russians and Americans, with Russians against Russians and Americans against Americans. But that's the only offering for peace because they have natures of negotiations. See, when Jeffrey Sachs used or Judge Napolitano used the words like negotiations, they're making the identity and holding the identity of physics bigger than and smaller than it is tactical, how ulterior from the relativity of it has to the identity of the hyper simultaneous and its identity of of relativity, to positive and negative simultaneously, distinctly from all of the things, while non-distinctly. Now, inside that too, greater than everyone, all groupings of countries too. No matter how powerful an individual leader could get, locations, areas, and states have been natures of industries relative to negotiations, where the word negotiations is being used as a criminally foreign influence fact-cheating nature, a criminal city since nature is all positive, relative to negatives like wars, where all these decades went by, and the nuclear holding nations stay like Russians and Americans are recorded reading statutes where they give the benefit of the doubt to this person based on their title, etc. And so, in other words, so what they're doing is forcing things before courts that they know are already criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw. They already have people A through Z who took oaths pretending they don't realize styles and natures of logic that can't defend themselves without valuing the real causes of things like slavery, blamed on other things others are solved. These styles of identities, and then they have the audacity to speak about other people's, with the, we don't want. Then they say, "Oh, well, I don't understand what they're saying." That's a common thing they say. Focus on the predicate acts. Fix the WFSB. Fake conversations with me about the World Trade Center attack. They have wire crimes with their phones, as distinctly but non-distinctly from Fox Connecticut News, who also has roles with the FBI. And they're to defend the capacities too, and to come. Judge Napolitano, I challenge you to play the ancient gaming system. It'll make it more fun. It'll make it fun. Real evolution science should only feel like game/S, or else we sense. See, you guys, for the breaching method, you have it the other. You have those same things. People will look. A lot of people say that with the little sayings they use and things like that. criminal insidious natures of principles of reason. So follow the law, because this is these five identities of order can be used to show that there is a criminal insidiousness, sick, tactically delusions wrought, and way worse, psychopath. Because we want to be about corrections. They're out of their mind. The corrections officers has roles with the criminally important. Whole bunch of people along Park Street too, with the cultural racketeering, with the Latino side of it. I left that out with the black KKK theme because you got the courts judges with it. You have all that Latino in there too, all along Park Street. There's Alina's Pizza, who has a Daryl Sullivan, and there's the Magdalena or associated with them, who has also roles with the Maggie and her roommates, other roommates of hers, involved with the intelligence community, foreign and domestic, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and some black KKK themed, and people on Church Street in Old Wethersfield with a whole bunch of doctors and foreign and domestic medical people involved with racketeering with judges and prosecutors, identity theft, fraud, slanders. That's in other words. So it might have been a faked it might have been a faked tornado reported on Walker Hill per one of the kids. I was minding my own business, jogging down Church Street, or a young man said, "You didn't cause that." And I didn't even see no word. I had no response. But that's the street of a Heather Hansen and of a Bruce Hansen and his mother and his wife, that a Joe DeMauro and a John DeMauro. I found out Paul DeMauro confirmed this. I never had in physical conversation with Paul DeMauro in my life. I was never around him. One time he was in a house when I was in middle school, and Joe DeMauro was making confessions regarding a fifth grade class. One conversation. Only time I ever saw him real quick on the campus, and right later that day, right when I was walking to the bus with a Mr. Abruzzi, which is also involved with FBI and courts, judges and prosecutors, and people that work with them who affected confessions to me, requests for help from the Eric Burgess before the World Trade Center attack. It turned out these are people like with the name Scalora associated with them in the locations next to their house. No, also a little kid's school and a fire department there. Has something to do with their roles with a Joseph Dennis too. He has roles with a whole bunch of people tied to former Mayor Gold with medical corruption and predicate acts with facts with kids and databases of schools. And then that crime scene has something to do with his roles with the ski locations in Connecticut, with the intelligence community, all sides of criminal and civil cases associated with this name Cololo, involved with whiting forensics and state police with Rhode Island and Vermont, and increasingly too my 8th grade teachers. People from the middle school are also by whiting forensics recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, further involved with Michael Emmett with child abusers, sexual, medical, educational. Get them on paper, one name and sequence. Let's go. Get them on paper. You can't call the police. They faked it and hid what's actually recorded already. Get on paper. Judge Napolitano, please. Shouldn't have to beg you all this time, one name and sequence. Pick one name and sequence for them.